Good morning. My name is Dwayne. Welcome to Directional Bible Ministries, a teaching ministry that is called to encourage, disciple, and challenge the people of God. Today is August the 26th, and we are continuing to work our way through the book of Acts together. Today we're going to pick up in Acts chapter number 17. Yesterday we looked at verses 1 through 3, so let's go ahead and read over those very quickly, and then we'll work our way as far as we can through the text. I've stopped telling people this is a 10 to 15 minute study. It's more of a 15 to 20 minute study every day. So anyway, can't even get the introductions done in 5 to 10 minutes. Acts chapter 17, verse number 1. Now, when they had passed through Amphipolis and Apollonia, they came to Thessalonica, where there was a synagogue of the Jews, and Paul, as his manner was, went in unto them, and 3 Sabbaths reasoned with them out of the Scriptures, opening and alleging that Christ must needs have suffered and risen again from the dead, and that this Jesus, whom I preach unto you, is the Christ. So, notice that once again, Paul goes straight to the synagogue. This never changes. He continues to do this. Every time he enters into a new city, we're going to see him down in, when he goes into Berea, he goes straight to the synagogue again. And it says, as his manner was, which means he made a habit out of doing this. And his reason was to reason with them out of the Scriptures. That means that Paul was trying to convince them using the Old Testament Scriptures. And this is something that I think that each of us should be able to do. And the only way for us to become efficient at it is just to do it. In Proverbs 27:17, iron sharpeneth iron. So a man sharpeneth the countenance of his friend. I think we need to challenge each other, and I encourage folks to challenge me. I don't have all the answers. I used to think I did, but not anymore. Even as I'm studying through, and of course, you know, as we're going through the book of Acts, and we're taking this mid-Acts approach, there's just things I don't understand. I've been going back and forth. I've read, yesterday I was reading Grace Ambassadors. I was reading the Berean, what's it called? The Berean Searchlight or whatever that was. I forget the name of it, but the Berean Bible Society, that's it. And then I was looking at, some other commentators in regards to when did Paul ever even preach the kingdom gospel? And there's some, like Grace Ambassadors, who say from Acts chapter 9, conversion, bam, from that point forth, he always preached a grace gospel. I struggle with that one a little bit. And again, I'm 53 years old. Gone are the days of just believing something because somebody else said so. Those days are gone. I want to see it in Scripture for myself. I want to believe it myself. I want to embrace it myself. I want to see it in the text myself. Done with the assumptions. So anyway, I've been looking at that, and then I've looked at others who say no. Paul initially did teach a kingdom gospel, just like everybody else, and continued to do so to the Jews throughout his ministry. Some will say no, he stopped preaching that as soon as he received the revelation of the mystery. Well, again, just iron sharpens iron. So a man sharpeneth the countenance of his friend. We just need each other to study, and I appreciate y'all's input in regards to what you see in the text as well. But we'll learn this together. Now notice what he was trying to do. It says that Paul, after his manner was, went in unto them, and 3 Sabbaths, reasoned with them out of the scriptures. And what was he doing? He was opening and alleging that Christ must needs have suffered, risen again from the dead, and that this Jesus whom I preached unto you is the Christ. So he was trying to convince them of that. And bear in mind, he was speaking to Jews. That's who were at the synagogues. Anybody else that would have been a Gentile in the synagogue would have been considered proselytes, or maybe even curious onlookers. But bear in mind, we're a long way outside of Jerusalem at the moment. These are predominantly Jews here. So he's speaking to Jews who, like many in the church today, believe that Jesus' ministry was a failure because it ended with the cross. They were blind or ignorant to the fact that the cross was very much a part of the plan. The cross had to happen for both Jew and Gentile. The cross had to happen for both the kingdom and the grace gospel. The cross was a part of the plan. Plan A did not fail with the crucifixion. The crucifixion was the plan. It had to happen. And Paul reasoned with them out of the scriptures that Christ must needs have suffered so that he could rise again from the dead. So he did that by using the scriptures. And again, too many in the church today see it the same way, and they review the rejection of the Messiah as the rejection of the kingdom. That's certainly the way that I've been taught. And thus we end up with an Acts 2 birth of the church. We see the rejection of the Messiah by the crucifixion, resulting in the birth of the church in Acts chapter number 2. But if the truth be known, the kingdom was not offered in the Gospels. The kingdom could not have been offered in the Gospels. The kingdom could not have been legitimately offered until the crucifixion and the resurrection. So it couldn't have happened in the Gospels. So if it didn't happen in the Gospels, where did it happen? It had to have happened at Pentecost in Acts chapter number 2. That's why Peter was given the keys. What you bind will be bound, and what you loose will be loosed. I mean, Peter used those keys in Acts chapter number 2. And notice that he did this for 3 Sabbath days. I think that anyone who teaches the scriptures to others knows that it just does not happen overnight. It didn't happen for us overnight. I've read passages of scripture, I've read commentaries on scripture for years, and it just never clicked with me because I just wasn't at that point where I was ready, or intellectually sometimes able to make it fit into what I already know. So it just doesn't happen overnight. Paul invested in these people. It takes time to convince people using the scriptures as to the truth of the gospel. He spent 3 whole Sabbaths with these guys, reasoning with them out of the scriptures, showing them that Christ must needs suffer for them. Notice, I believe, and this is what we were talking about. And I can only look what's before me. Some would say, that Paul here was preaching a kingdom gospel to the Jewish believers in the synagogue. They would say that Paul still was not fully aware of the postponement of the kingdom. So whether he was preaching the kingdom to the Jew or the grace gospel to the Gentile, it was all going to culminate in the second coming of Christ and the establishment of the kingdom. He did not have the postponement in view at this time. Again, Lord knows I don't want to be the one to read into scripture. But I would definitely say that I believe Paul had not really received the full revelation in regards to the postponement of the kingdom, that it really was not going to happen, that the Jews, as you would later write in the book of Romans, were blinded. And, it had been postponed, and the gospel was going to the Gentiles, and the church age, the age of grace, had began, and it would culminate with the rapture of the church, and then God would turn back to the Jew and fulfill Daniel's 70th week and the second coming, and then the establishment of the kingdom. I just don't think Paul totally understood that. I think as Paul came to these revelations, he penned his epistles. He penned Galatians, he penned First and Second Corinthians. He penned the book of Ephesians. As he came to these revelations. Notice in verse number 4, and we're going to get down into chapter number 17, and I'm going to give you just one reason I see that maybe Paul was here preaching the gospel of the kingdom. And again, just be open to it, and we'll all be open to the fact that maybe I'm seeing this wrong. Nothing wrong with that. Notice he says, and some of them believed and consorted with Paul and Silas, and the devout Greeks, a great multitude of the chief women, not a few. So in the end, it says some of them believed what Paul was preaching, that Christ must needs have suffered. Some of them believed that, and then they consorted. And then when that word consorted comes into play in verse number 4, I'll show you what I'm talking about here. It's the word that literally means to cast lots with, to give a common lot to. So in other words, it says they cast their lots with Paul and Silas. In other words, they were all in to what Paul was saying. So some of them believed, both Jews and Greeks. That the word Greek there, let's see, and some of them believed, let's see, verse number 4, and some of them, let me get, consorted with Paul and Silas, devout Greeks. Notice it's Hellene. This is speaking of this is not an Hellenist like we talked about over in Acts chapter number 6, where it was literally Greek-speaking Jews. This is Hellas, which is referring to non-Jewish people. So these would be proselytes that were proselyted into the Jewish faith, Gentiles, and they are believing what Paul is presenting to them here. So some of them believed and consorted, cast their lot with Paul and Silas, and of the devout Greeks, a great multitude, and of the chief women, not a few, were in agreement with Paul after he had reasoned for 3 Sabbaths in the synagogue. Now notice the rest of verse 5. But the Jews, which believed not. So these are Jews that were unbelieving Jews. They were moved with envy. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? They took unto them certain lewd fellows of the baser sort, and gathered a company, and set all the city in an uproar. So again, here we go again. These unbelieving Jews, they were moved with envy. Can't just disagree and walk away. Like they used to say in church life, they got to run it or they'll ruin it. And that is exactly what they were doing. I have flashbacks of pastoring a church. They got to run it or they'll ruin it. I've been involved in churches where, I've seen that. And of course, troublemakers are never content to go it alone. Oh no, they got to take somebody with them. They always proceed to gather the discontented and the confused around them. Troublemakers are never content to go it alone. They're always going to bring somebody along with them. And the longer you let them stay there, the more they're going to gather. It's like a cancer in the body. You might as well, like Barney Fife used to say, just nip it, nip it, nip it, because it's going to spread. So again, I'm having some flashbacks here. So, and notice that they were moved with envy. So instead of comparing Scripture with Scripture, they're just moved with fleshly jealousy against Paul and Silas. And in turn, they gathered unto them certain lewd fellows of the baser sort. And this means that these people were easy to influence, of the baser sort. Lewd speaks to the fact that they're given to mischievousness. They're given to doing wrong because they are of the baser sort. It literally means they're ignorant. And certainly it's easy to manipulate ignorant people when they don't know any better. They're given to it, and then you throw the sin in there. Nothing's more dangerous than sinful, ignorant people. And that's what they did. They gathered these sinful, ignorant fellows around them and set all the city in an uproar against Paul and Silas. And then notice in the end of verse 5, and assaulted the house of Jason and sought to bring them out to the people. And when they found them not, they drew Jason and certain brethren unto the rulers of the city, crying, These that have turned the world upside down are come hither also, whom Jason has received, and these all do contrary to the decrees of Caesar, saying that there is another king, one Jesus. Well, first of all, little is known about Jason. But he apparently was hosting Paul and Silas. At least that's what most see in the text, that they were staying at his home. And of course, that was guilt by association. He does seem to be mentioned in Romans chapter 16, verse 21, Timotheus, my fellow worker, and Lucius and Jason, my kinsmen, salute you. So, whoever Jason was, he was all in, and therefore they wanted to hold him accountable for Paul and Silas, for bringing him into the city. What's interesting here is the accusation that they bring against Paul and Silas is that they have turned the world upside down and are come here also. The accusation is that of insurrection. Some would say that this is proof that Paul was teaching a kingdom gospel. Because had he been teaching a grace gospel, which is a spiritual heavenly gospel, they would not have accused him of turning the world upside down and saying that there is another king. And as you and I both know, the kingdom gospel is an earthly, physical gospel that speaks of a king and a kingdom. So they're accusing him of insurrection. And again, some would say, those who err on the side that Paul is indeed and continued to preach the gospel of the kingdom, would say right there, see, I mean, how could they accuse him of insurrection if he was preaching a grace gospel? He had to have been teaching a king and a kingdom gospel here. And remember, the kingdom gospel is spoke of as future, physical, and fraternal. And it was promised to the Jews. So, and an insurrection, by definition, is an act or instance of revolting against a civil government or authority. The grace gospel just doesn't teach that. And bear in mind, I mean, that is the exact same thing that they accused Jesus of, who we know preached the kingdom. In Luke 23:2, and they began to accuse him, saying, "We found this fellow perverting the nation and forbidding to give tribute to Caesar, saying that he himself is Christ, a king." So again, he was accused of insurrection. Why? Because he spoke of a kingdom of which he is the king. So that's a good argument in favor of the fact that they were preaching a kingdom gospel here. The hypocrisy of it is that while accusing Jesus of being an insurrectionist, they asked the release of a known convicted insurrectionist by the name of Barabbas. So they were releasing one insurrectionist in favor of another insurrectionist. In Luke 23:18, and they cried out all at once, saying, "Away with this man, and release unto us Barabbas, for a certain sedition made in the city, and for murder was cast into prison." That word sedition there in verse number 18 speaks of, or verse number 19 speaks of insurrection. Other translations like the NAS, he was one who had been thrown into prison for a certain insurrection. So the hypocrisy of it all is they were trading one insurrectionist for another. Again, I just don't think, at least, the way I'm seeing this, that they could have accused him of this had he been simply preaching a grace gospel. So, and maybe they just misunderstood it, as he's preaching about how the Christ must needs suffered and been crucified and resurrected so that the kingdom could be offered. Either way, what they walked away with was he is teaching things that are contrary to the decrees of Caesar. And he is saying that there is another king, one Jesus. So just something to think about. So we'll keep studying it together every day. And tomorrow we'll pick up in verses 8 and 9. God bless you. Good to see you this morning. Brother, I hope that you're doing well. And I hope that you have a great day. And we'll see you tomorrow morning, Lord willing.